kind of freeing to not tie pay to performance, right? So it's like you said, it's kind of political where everything you do at work you can think of as adding fuel to the fire for your next bonus or your next performance review. Performance reviews for us are a nice check-in with your manager to make sure that you're working on what you want to be working on. You're working on what your team thinks is important to be working on. Your skill level is where it needs to be. Your engagement level is where it needs to be.
Hello, welcome to another episode of the As Discussed podcast. Today, I am joined by Andrea LaRowe. Andrea joined 37signals in 2010 as a relatively early hire. Now, 37signals, in case you haven't come across them, is the company behind the project management software Basecamp and Hey, and they're just about to launch the next iteration of that Basecamp software. I've been looking forward to speaking with Andrea for some time because I've known about 37signals for some time. 37signals is a real-world example for a company that operates with high trust and low control over its workforce. So at 37signals, they don't have the annual merit cycle, they don't have equity awards, they don't have an annual bonus, they just have a profit share. They also run a very flat organization, and while it's not quite as flat as it used to be, they have a minimal number of levels with very clear criteria for advancement between those. If you're interested in learning more about 37signals, and it is a very interesting company to look into, you can find their employee handbook on their website. There are also several books written by the founders. One that I've read is called Rework and is a very short, practical, useful guide to running a company built on trust rather than control. And they also have a podcast also called Rework, which I recommend checking out as well. So in this discussion, I took the opportunity to ask, practically speaking, how a high trust company works in the real world, what problems they encounter. If you don't use pay, how do you drive performance and how do you drive accountability? What replaces these traditional mechanisms that we've leaned on for so long to drive performance? And we also talked about the limits of a high trust environment. How far can you trust people to do their work, and at what point does leadership need to step in to address any issues in the workplace? I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope you do as well. As always, if you do enjoy it, please like it, please rate it on whatever platform you've come across this, and please share it with a friend as well. That's the best way to share these stories. So without further ado, I give you Andrea LaRowe of 37signals. Andrea LaRowe, thank you very much for joining me. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. 37signals. So I've been really looking forward to this discussion because 37signals is a company that does things differently. And I like speaking to companies that do things differently to hear about how they do that. So I've got a ton of questions. I'll be surprised if we run out of time because there's a lot I'd like to dig into with you. But just to start off with, I'd love to hear, you've been there for 16 years now, is that right?
Yes.
So I'd love to hear in your own words, what makes 37signals different? How does it distinguish itself from the regular companies?
Sure. Yeah, I have been there over 15 years now. First, my name is Andrea. I'm the head of people operations at 37signals, director of people operations at 37signals. We are a software development company. We make our flagship product as Basecamp, which is project management software. And we make Hey, which is email software. And then we have a kind of a handful of other ancillary products as well. 37signals started as a product design firm. Our CEO, Jason, was a product designer, a visual designer. So we started a little company with some friends. And as they were working, they discovered a need for project management software. So the Basecamp came out of a need that they had as product designers. So eventually that overtook the design work that they were doing. And they found that other people needed project management software like Basecamp, and people wanted to buy it. So that eventually became what they worked on full time. So, they hired programmers. They hired David, who's our CTO / founder now. But they hired him as a, 17, 18-year-old kid to do some coding. And so the Basecamp grew out of there, and now we're a 61 person company. Still working on Basecamp, still working on some other products. And I loved it ever since I started 15, 16 years ago. What makes us different is, I think, the opinions that we hold as a company, and um, that translates to how we work on our software, that translates to the code that we produce, and that translates to how we run the business and manage the people in it. It's an opinionated company. A lot of times we don't really pay attention to industry trends, industry norms. And in fact, a lot of times we're just a few years ahead of that. So I think that just kind of reverberates throughout the company, like I said, through the software, through the code, through the people, through the management, through the structure and the policies and all the things
Mm,
that happen
mm.
on that end.
Yeah, and I want to dig into some of that as well because is it fair to say that you're fairly decentralized in the way that you do things?
Very much, yeah. So like I said, Jason and David are at the top. They're our founders, CEO, CTO. Um, So, that's probably the top of the structure, but then from there, it's pretty flat. We have our teams who all have, their working order. So, programmers, work on engineering, designers work on product design. Our ops team, our SREs work on the technical architecture. We have kind of programming teams that work on different areas. There's web product and mobile product and, security and infrastructure and performance who are focused on that. Customer support. So all of our teams kind of have their marching orders, and then they are very much responsible for what they work on, the direction that they set, the way the individuals work within those teams. So there's not a ton of oversight from the top into what's going on at the team, or definitely not at the individual level.
So I was going to ask about payout. I think I'd actually like to dig into that kind of structure. It's my understanding that it's fairly simple in its structure, that you don't
Mhm.
have too many roles and levels. So before we talk about pay, which I really want to get some of your thoughts on that, how granular or ungranular are your jobs, and how many levels do you have throughout your 60 odd people?
Yeah, not many.
Yeah.
So I kind of mentioned the team structure. And so we have the individuals, of course, that work within those teams. And within the teams, we have 5 levels. Starts at the junior level, which we call level 1, goes all the way up through level 5. So really, there's only 5 points that you can hit on the seniority level within any given job. And within a team, there's usually one job. So, for example, our ops team, those are our SREs. You would not necessarily start at level 1, but the lowest level that you could start at would be a level 1 or junior SRE, and then you would level up to level 5. And that's really it. There's no other track. There's no management track. You don't split off and join like a senior technical team, anything like that. It's really just 5 levels within one team. And then, we have a team lead at the top of that.
Yeah, yeah. So, and if I remember correctly from reading the book, which is called Rework, that's the name of the book, right? Yeah. So you have this manager of one philosophy,
Mhm.
right? Yeah. So let's come back to that later, actually, because I want to talk about how pay relates first. But so you do things a bit differently with pay, as I understand it. You keep it simpler for most companies. So most
Mhm.
companies have this sort of annual merit cycle. You have bands within the roles, and every year you figure out who gets what, and you sort of rate people and all that kind of thing. But you do things differently. So how do things work at 37 Signals with pay?
It's very straightforward. We benchmark our salaries with a company called Radford, a survey company called Radford. I think you're familiar with them. So annually, around November, December, we get survey data from them every year with information, salary data, salary information, job information. So we tie the jobs that we have at 37 Signals to the jobs that are represented in their database. And then every year, we just kind of do the comparison. So we look at, for example, a senior programmer, level 3 senior programmer, we tie that to the same level, seniority level, and job title that's represented in the Radford data. And then we just make sure that our salary that we're paying is kind of where we want it to be on the Radford scale. And where we want it to be is in the top 10% of what a senior programmer would be paid in the San Francisco tech market. And then we do that across the board. So it's, we tie our programmers to the Radford programmer role, we tie our product designers to the product designer role, and we try to hit that target of that top 10%, the 90th percentile of the Radford salary data in San Francisco. And then we just go through and we make sure that all of our salaries are where we want them to be. We just go level by level, job by job, And if what we're paying is below that target, then we bump our salary up to meet it. And if it's at or above the target in Radford, then we just keep it where it is. We don't like lower it to meet it. We just keep it where it is. We just keep it static until the next year, and then we review it again.
Yeah.
There's no negotiations. There's no conversations that go into this. The managers, in fact, have like no part in this process. It's all HR and all leadership who are kind of reviewing the files, reviewing the data, making the decisions. If there's any like kind of conversations that need to be had at all, then we're having those conversations, and then just conveying the information to the managers and the teams for a January 1 adjustment.
Yeah. So no merit cycle then. So you do have
Yeah,
performance ratings?
we do. We
Mm.
do that. We do performance reviews annually on everyone's anniversary, so they're staggered throughout the year for managers. But pay
It's not
is
tied to
not
that.
tied to performance whatsoever. The only reason pay would be tied to performance is if someone gets a level promotion, and then
Right.
therefore, of course, you get a salary bump.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of people, I would imagine, like the idea of this, the idea of the merits, get abandoning the merit cycle, because it takes up everyone's so much time, creates a lot of stress, becomes very political. Have you worked in companies that do? Have you seen both
Yeah,
sides of this now?
of course.
I
Yeah.
assume that you have a preference. Yeah.
I it's kind of freeing to not tie pay to performance, right?
Right.
So it's like like you said, it's kind of political where everything you do at work you can think of as adding like fuel to the fire for your
Mm.
next bonus or your next performance review. Performance reviews for us are a nice check-in with your
Yeah.
manager to make sure that you're working on what you want to be working on. You're working on what your team thinks is important to be working on. Your skill level is where it needs to be. Your engagement level is where it needs to be.
Mm.
All of that's a really nice. It's just nice. Also, on your anniversary, it's just a nice kind of like symbolic
Yeah.
check-in point to be like, yeah, things are going well, or I kind of am bored of focusing on this thing. I'd rather kind of start focusing on this now. Like, let's kind of have this big picture check-in. So there's a lot of pressure taken off of that process when there's no pay tied to it.
Mm.
It's really just about the work and the motivation and how you're showing up to work. As I said, as other companies, I have friends obviously who work at companies that do merit pay and incentive pay. And it's just a constant, it's almost like a tally card or a scorecard. You're just constantly keeping score and adding it up instead of focusing on what really matters, the
Mm.
intrinsic motivation.
Yeah, and of course, because it's not tied to an annual cycle, it means you can do it on the anniversary date, which spreads that
Mhm.
workload out, I imagine, for
Hugely
anyone doing it,
helpful.
rather than that sort of
Yeah.
annual, okay, drop everything, we need to do performance reviews type thing for the next 2 weeks. It's
Yeah.
just a
Yeah.
drip
The
feed
team
of,
leads appreciate
yeah,
just having it kind of staggered throughout the year.
yeah. Okay. So no, you don't have merit cycle. So you've got so everything up to that point is fairly similar. So you've got your levels, 5 levels, probably fewer than a lot of organizations now. I feel like many organizations want to have distinguished and principals and fellow ones and fellow twos, and you almost end up with like 9 grades for some companies, which I think is excessive because at that point it sort of loses meaning. But you've got fewer grades, but then you do benchmark, and you benchmark to the 90th percentile. So it's a healthy level of pay as well. That's probably important to note. That's about what 22-23% higher than most companies that target the 50th percentile, and it's the Bay Area, and it's Radford, so it's the top, the top of the top of
It's
the top.
high.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
in a way
Yeah.
gets rid of the problem to some degree,
It
that you
does.
know that you've got confidence in that.
It is. It's objectively high pay, right? Like we can kind of lean on that a little bit where, when if we don't have equity, we don't do incentive pay. So like we have to kind of compensate for that by paying really well. And so like that's why we tie to the point that we do in Radford because um if people don't see a raise year over year, that's hard. That's a hard message to convey,
Hmm.
like just on a human level, people want to see their salary go up and up and up
Right.
year over year. And if it's not, you have to be able to be certain that you're paying well, right? Like it's like, well, we still know that we're paying better than 90% of the company. If you were to go out and try to find the same job elsewhere, we're paying better than 90% of the places or 89% of the places
Yeah.
that you would be looking.
That makes sense. Because of that lack of merit cycle, you don't have that political negotiation process. Because what happens in a lot of companies is the only way to get more money is to advocate for yourself as an
Mhm.
individual, because you know you're de facto in competition with your colleagues, that merit budget. So that goes away. But I'm curious as to whether any of that mentality gets replaced by a promotional cycle, because now you're kind of saying, well, no, you can't get more money by behaving any differently in a merit. But obviously, you do have promotions, and people might then look to those promotions as their opportunity to get more money. Do you find any of that political sort of awkwardness reemerges in the promotional cycle, or is that sufficiently decoupled to avoid those issues?
Because we have so few levels and we're very clear that being promoted, especially past the level of senior, which is our level 3, is very hard and takes a long time. There is an expectation that if you join the company as a level 1 or 2, that you will move up within a couple of years. That's we kind of level 3 is the baseline expectation for someone who's going to stay at the company for a long time. So you have to be contributing at what we determine as to be a senior level at any role in any role, um, to remain on the team. It's just for distribution of work, we find that that needs to be the base level for the work to be distributed in a fair and even way. Um, so after that, though, like once you reach level 3, there is no expectation that you'll go up to a 4 or a 5. In fact, it's expected that you won't level up to a 5. 5 is really reserved. That's what we call principal, and that's reserved for people who are contributing at a level that's exceptional. It's kind of driving the industry forward in some ways, in like technical ways. So they're making technical contributions that are not only moving our products forward and our company forward, but the industry forward. And um, so there's zero expectation that any hire is going to make it through all the way to. It also takes years. It takes perhaps decades for people to reach that level. So I think we're really clear about that. I think the people that sit at those levels, when people join, they see the kind of work that they're doing, and it just observing that, it becomes clear to you over time that, okay, I'm not going to get there. So level 3, or I won't get there for some time. Level 3 is attainable and expected, but there's a timeline on that. We do also put a timeline on that. So the timeline alone kind of removes the political nature, or the kind of lobbying for yourself, because we're upfront that we do expect you to eventually, over the course of 2 to 4 years, contribute at that senior level.
Hmm. That makes sense. And in a weird way, what you're describing is the way things used to be with the engineering track. So,
Mm,
yeah, in most careers, you expect to move fairly quickly through few levels as you start to learn your trade. But principal did used to be reserved for most companies
mhm.
for someone that was really an industry changer. Increasingly, it's kind of dropped down in the organization to just an almost expected title that you get at a certain time. But it sounds like the way you're treating it is like, no, there needs to be, you need to be demonstrably different here. And I think what's
Yes.
happened to a lot of leveling charts, particularly when we've got so many levels now, is the differences. Those words are massively subjective. They don't really mean anything. You can interpret them all kinds of different ways. And the research shows that the more ambiguous the wording, the more it says about the rater rather than the ratee as well. So, but what you're saying is that there is a clear, demonstrable difference between the 3 and the 4 in your case. And I
Yes.
imagine that the way we mentioned something at the beginning as well, the organization needs to need that as well. You can't just have everyone jumping up to a 4 because they want
Correct.
to. You can only have so many industry experts before it becomes kind of pointless, right? And before
Yes.
they just get in each other's way.
Yes, and there are other qualities, right? So, judgment is a huge piece that so skill is of the utmost importance to any role that we have at 37 Signals. You cannot progress past a level 1, a junior level, if you don't have the core technical skills that are required of the job that we hired you for. Even like level 2, level 3, we have a high expectation on that front. But then beyond that, we have these other qualities that we expect of everyone, things like judgment and like decision-making skills. So things that really inform this manager of one concept that you brought up earlier. People who are very self-driven and autonomous and competent in their decision-making and in their judgment. And those are the things that emerge when they get to the higher levels that are unusual. So someone has unusually good judgment or unusually good decision-making skills. When you get to the lead level, the level 4, level 5 levels, like those are the things that kind of distinguish people. It's the skills, of course, first, but then these other kind of qualities that come out that really distinguish between the 3 and the 4 and then the
Yeah.
5.
And I'll come back to that one in a second, actually, as well. But just to finish up on pay, then, so I think you don't have a bonus, is that right?
We don't have a bonus. We have profit share.
You
We do
do
a
profit
profit
share.
sharing
Okay.
program.
So, yeah. So
Mhm.
is that evenly to everyone, or is there a level based sort of allocation on that?
That's based on tenure.
Okay.
So every year at the end of the year, we close the books and tally up the profits made by the company, and then we take that and we take 10% of the profits and we distribute it amongst the employees. Um, the benefit kicks in at 2 years. So once you've worked here for 2 years, you start accumulating shares, 1 share a month, starting on your second anniversary. Um, and then it caps out at, I want to say 6 years. I should know this, but we just changed the benefit not too long ago. So I think it's 6 years, you kind of top out. And then once you hit your 10 year, you get like a bonus, you get some bonus shares. So it is by 10 years. So the longer you've been with the company, the more shares that you get every year. And then that grows every year for 6 years. Um, so, it's not a bonus. It's kind of
Good old
it's like
fashioned
a
profit share.
profit share,
Yeah.
and it's a retention strategy as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, so far, so it's clear that you're avoiding individual negotiations. So with your base salary,
Yes.
you don't have that room for negotiation. With the profit share, equally, you don't have that room for negotiation. So it's so ingrained in corporate America, the idea of individual pay for individual performance. Everyone needs to get their fair share. It's a very American mentality to think that way. And when you talk to companies about taking that away, the reaction is often, well, that's not fair though. What about our high performers? What about our low performers? What are we going to end up? What about those free riders? We're going to start paying them even though they're not doing any work. And what about our
Mm.
top performers? They're going to leave if they don't get more than the people that they know they're better than that. If we can't differentiate individuals, then everyone's just going to, be up in arms about that. But evidently that doesn't happen at 37 Signals. So there's not really a question there, but talk me through it. So do you see any of that? Do you see any requests for individual differentiation? Do you see it as a problem that you aren't able to differentiate?
No, in fact, I've only ever heard positive feedback, not only from our current employees, but when we're recruiting, because it comes up a lot, as you might imagine, in recruiting. People trying to negotiate their salary or a signing bonus or something, something new, and it's very, I think, refreshing to people, for me, and for me, to be able to say, like, kind of just no, like a blanket, no, we don't do that. Like, I'm sorry if that's a barrier for you, then good luck to you.
Right.
But it's usually refreshing to people because it is so arbitrary. Like, before we used Radford, before we did the benchmarking, we did raises, I think, way that a lot of companies do, when it was like, oh, you had a great year. Like, how about another 10 grand? Like, how does that sound to you? So that's not a very rewarding system. It's arbitrary, like I said, and it's kind of biased. It's really, it was based on recency, like, what have you done for me lately, kind of thing. And so once, if you haven't, then you get a lower it was kind of all over the place. So not having any room for negotiation on any aspect of compensation has been, like I said, it's been all positive that I've heard from everybody.
But yeah, why do people stay? Like if you got a high performer and they're not getting 5% rather than 3%, for example, is that sufficient for them to stay and keep enjoying their work?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of that comes down to the fact that we just have high expectations for performance in general. People don't, like, we don't have low performers that kind of slip under the radar. So when people are comparing themselves to their peers, first of all, I don't have too many. Our teams are very small, so there's not too many, say, senior programmers or senior designers on a team, and if there are, they are very much peers. Like, that goes into our promotion conversations, right? Like, i- if you're comparing programmer A's performance to programmer B at the same level, like, does that kind of make sense, or does it seem like they should be up a level? So we do a little bit of that informally. We have high expectations for performance across the board. Our teams are small. Low performers can't fly under the radar. It's very obvious. All of our work is very visible. So if someone is not contributing at the same level as their peers, it becomes pretty obvious pretty quickly.
Yeah. And what happens in those scenarios then? So I assume it does happen that you do get a low performer.
Sure.
What's this process for handling that?
Yeah, I mean, it probably depends. Sometimes we differentiate between low performance being a skill level and an engagement issue, a skill issue or an engagement issue. So unfortunately, if someone's just not at the skill level that they need to be, we'll give it time for their trajectory to correct if they are kind of more of a new employee. But if we see their trajectory is not where it needs to be, that's a termination conversation. On the other hand, if it's an engagement thing, like maybe they're not working on the right projects, or maybe something's going on personally, or, there's any number of reasons that people aren't showing up to work the way that they should be. Um, that's definitely a coaching conversation and things. That's when we have a manager or myself or somebody step in and try to help correct whatever's gone wrong. At the end of the day, we have a high bar for everybody. We're a small company. We have small teams. We have high expectations for the volume, the amount of work that people are putting in. There's a lot to be done, and so everyone needs to kind of pull their weight. So we do have conversations about terminations when it seems like there's someone kind of not performing where they need to be.
Yeah, but it sounds like you exhaust other possibilities first, though. To your point, you try and have a conversation around why it's not
Sure.
working, and could it be the wrong team or the wrong fit before you. And do you use PIPs, by performance improvement plan?
Not really. We do we have, and it's just a lot of times those seem like, I don't know, I don't wanna say a waste of time, but it's
I think
it's
everyone's got the same view on pips. It's like one of these running jokes. It's like, if you're on a pip, it's basically
yeah,
like we're trying to find reasons to get rid of you legitimately at that point. It's like it's a
just, like,
documentation process.
document it, and it's
Yeah,
so, like, I find it much more useful to just, like, once you've identified the problem, right? Like, you gotta tell the person what's gone wrong and,
yeah.
have a conversation with them, let them know, be clear about it, be clear about what the consequences are gonna be. So these are conversations that I have with our team leads and our managers quite often, which is like, you gotta say the words. You have to you have to tell them that their job's on the line, and,
Right.
here's what's gone wrong, and here's how you need to correct, and here's the time frame that you have. And I mean, that's really a PIP, is like, how much
Yeah,
time do
yeah,
I
exactly.
have?
Right.
What's wrong? And, like, what's gonna happen if I don't do it? So we do that, but, like, we don't do, like, a formal document that we've put in their
Yeah.
personnel file. Yeah.
So that's that. So that, and again, that's one of the fears of this not having this merit performance management cycle is the free rider. Well, we're giving dollars to our low performers, where we could be giving them to our high performers. And that's always been the sales piece of pay for performance. To
Mhm.
which my response is, that's surely the least of your problems. If you've got a low performer, like you're going
For
to give them
sure.
2% instead of 3%, it's not going to fix that, is it? So your solution is, well, let's figure out it because of the visibility. I think the visibility is key. When you've got a small team, and you can't hide away. That transparency is the first key part of it, and then it's honesty. After that, it's having a real conversation with them about how and why, and then if there's a better solution to it, and if not, well, you need to go because this isn't working out well for anyone.
Yes.
But in no part of that process does pay help. So if you're paying
No.
them anyway, it just doesn't make a difference. It's not going to solve for that problem.
Yeah, compensation is, like, the last thing on my mind when I'm thinking about
Right?
performance.
Yeah.
Like, it because the worst thing that happens when someone's a low performer is the impact on the rest of the team.
Hmm.
That's the worst thing that we see is it drags the team down, it drags the morale down, it drags their productivity down. So that is more that needs handling more than, like, oh, do it, their bonus might not be where they want it to be this year. Like, that's not the question on my mind. The question is, how do we get them as performant as the rest of their team?
Right. At the other end, we sort of touched on it, but the high performers then. So a lot of people and a lot of companies have been sold this idea that the merit cycle is your opportunity to get more for you as an individual. And there's a fear that if you take away that system, well, my high performers, if they don't get their 5% instead of 3%, they're going to be disappointed. And I think we kind of touched on this, but presumably you're high anchoring in the first place. And the transparency means, well, let me ask, I mean, does that ever come up? Does anyone say, hey, I've had a great year, I should get more? Does that conversation ever happen?
No, it hasn't that I'm aware of. Like you said, the high salary point helps, because we have that. We also have the profit share, which acts kind of as a bonus because the longer you've been with the company, the higher your profit share is going to
Hmm.
be. Um, but really, I think strategically, we've gotten away from tying um, tying pay to performance, tying pay to motivation.
Hmm.
Um, People that work and perform well, the high performers at 37 Signals, which is, when I say that, I mean, like, nearly everyone. That's when I say high performers, I mean most of the people that work at this company. Of course, they're working for pay. Everyone works for pay, but the pay is not what's driving their performance. It's the environment that we've set up. It's the culture that we've cultivated. that's driving their performance and their work ethic. So we hire for people who are very self-driven, um, people who thrive on like learning. They're curious. They want it to be set up with like the resources that they need, a great team around them, brilliant, brilliant people around them. They want to be left alone. They want to be able to do the job that they were hired to do and grow themselves within that role. They don't want to take on people management jobs. We have people who were like managers, engineering managers, directors of engineering coming to 37 Signals because they just want to code. Like they don't want to think about anything else. They don't want to think about people. They just want to hone their craft, get better at what they love, and be left alone while they do it. And then be
And so simple.
compensated and rewarded. Yeah, it is. And I mean, it's great. And it's and like I said, it's this intrinsic motivation that compels them to keep showing up and improving at their craft and pursuing excellence in their craft. So strategically, we don't tie pay to performance, and I think that kind of translates in that the people that work here don't tie pay to their own performance, to their motivation.
As you're speaking, and I do this quite a lot these days, I use self-determination theory as my framework for thinking about
Mm,
how well a company is going to get performance from its people. And it's these three pillars: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So as you're speaking about your philosophy, I'm mentally checking off these three things. Like you just let people get on. That's autonomy. It's this, you're not working with the assumption that people need to be managed to get their work done. You're working with the assumption that they want to get their work done because the work's interesting, if you allow it to be interesting, and then you let them figure out how to do that. So that's the autonomy piece. And then to your point, you use the words hone your craft. Again, that's competence. Just let people get better at the thing they want to be better at. Whereas I think in the traditional organization, you're basically, as soon as you have this kind of org chart and these career ladders, you're telling people what they need to do to progress their career rather than allowing them to do what they want to do to progress their own career. Again, with the assumption that we know better than you. And that's the thing that drives me nuts. I know how your career should look. Well, you don't, but they probably do. And they probably know how they want to progress and make things better. And if they're allowed to figure that out for themselves, they might figure out a whole set of skills you never even thought about that could be
yes,
useful to you. And then the
that happens
relatedness piece as
frequently.
well. And the final, but yeah, let people work with great teams. You said, I think you used the word great teams. Yeah, just let people find a group of people that they enjoy working with, a healthy, non-toxic environment with intellectual honesty. And it's amazing how powerful. So as you're talking, you're just basically delivering on those three pillars. So it's no great surprise to me that you've got a healthy work environment because you're doing those things. Um, which brings me on to a question about the manager of one, which I was really annoyed to read because it kind of summed up the philosophy that I've had in the back of my mind for years now, which is that we don't need to have managers and non-managers. That's a factory supervisor model that we've inherited.
Hmm.
The idea of someone that needs to watch to make sure everyone's doing the things that they're supposed to do, which drives me nuts because people are not children. They are very capable of figuring things out. Just leave them to get on with it. But you have this idea of the manager one. So a few years ago, I kind of came up with this concept. Well, let's just assume everyone's a manager, and then they can use
Hmm.
those managerial skills whenever and wherever they feel they need to, and people can figure out who should be that manager if there needs to be one, or not bother having one if there doesn't need to be one. And then I read the words "manager of one" in that rework book. So talk me through what that means to be a manager of one, and practically speaking, how that plays out day to day.
Yeah, it's probably evolved over the years since rework. Right now, we do have team leads, we do have managers. When rework was written, that's a tongue twister. When
When
rework
rework
was
was
written, uh, 37 Signals is even more flat than it is now. I think we probably had like 12 people, and like
Mhm.
everybody worked on the same thing at the same time, and there were no managers. So it was very much expected that you figured out what you were going to work on. You figured out what needed to be done. Um, you figured out a plan to get it done, and you kind of let everybody know you were working on it, and then you just went and did it, and that was it. And that was how we worked, and it still is to some degree. That instinct to seek out work is really at the core of what a manager of one is. So you're not sitting around waiting for somebody to tell you what to do. You're not sitting around waiting for someone to tell you good job. You are seeking out problems and finding solutions to those and then implementing those solutions. And you're taking resources to do it. So if you're finding something that needs to be done and you need the help of a programmer, you're kind of working to get that set up. So it's like it's very self-driven. It's kind of like the saying, don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness. That very much applies to the way that we work. Um, where you're going forth and doing work and then saying like, oh, I did this thing, and then you move on to the next. So it's also, autonomy, it's self-motivation, it's good judgment, it's exercising judgment and determining, priorities of what needs to be done. Um and it's extending trust to the people around you as well. So, we work in a very high trust environment where I know that everybody that I work with is very good at what they do. They're very skilled, and I trust them to not only know what to work on, but the right way to work on it, and that applies to everybody. So that's really manager of one. But there's a little more, I guess, of the structure to it now that we have like team leads. And people who are monitoring the work being done, but it's still inherently the way that we work and the way that we
Yeah.
expect people to show up to work.
Yeah, and those and that's really driven by that leveling guide. So you get to that sort of team lead level. Is there any sort of mechanism for feedback for those team leads? Like, how do you know those team leaders are being good team leaders, or is it just play into the trust thing? Because a lot of people will know what it feels like to have a toxic manager, and all the
Sure.
research consistently tells us that the quality of the manager is the number one driver of your ability to be engaged with your work. So, do you have mechanisms to make sure that those leaders are being good managers in that respect?
We we don't. So it's funny that you bring this up. We just talked about this because I had the same question. I was like,
Yeah.
"Hey, guys."
Yeah.
Um, and so we kind of figured out that we have 2 team leads at this company. One is like a people manager. So I have an HR generalist on my team. I do her reviews. I do her performance reviews. I kind of approve big projects that she decides to work on. So like I manage her. If something were to go wrong, she would come to me. Um, but then there's like the team leads that are more responsible for like team operations or technical operations. So people who are making decisions about long-term plans for the team and strategic plans for the team. Um, the people management piece, like we have no oversight or no kind of metrics for like what makes a good people manager. That's kind of down to feedback that I might get from the person's direct report, people, or feedback that I might get from the manager himself. But the technical leaders, that we do consider as part of their overall performance. So when we do a performance review for a team lead or for a director, there is a section for kind of leadership and just general skill level in managing and strategic planning.
Yeah, and the people doing that, is that their managers, or do you get feedback from also the people that they are managing, like up and
I
down
mean,
feedback?
it's not as formal as someone at a lower level.
Mm,
So we are pretty strict about getting performance reviews done for like a level 1 through 3,
mm.
junior through senior, just because they tend to be newer to the company. And so having those formal performance review check-ins is helpful to guide them through the first few years. Once people hit a level 4 or 5 or director level, we don't typically do formal like written reviews like we do for the 1 through 3s. But we do have frameworks that I would refer to, or that leadership would refer to, in if we suspect, probably is really the most accurate thing. If we suspect that someone is underperforming at their team leadership duties, then we would refer to the framework, um, to try to suss out why that might be, or where they're failing.
Yeah, it sounds like you got almost a sufficient psychological safety that natural mechanisms would allow that to be uncovered. Part of the reason I was asking is that a lot of participative cultures that I've come across in case studies and those I've spoken to, they often end up in some form of upward feedback. and upward
Mhm.
selection. So various companies, like the logic is that if you've got a manager that's managing 6 to 8 people, whatever that may be, the opinions of those 6 to 8 is much more valuable than the opinions of that one manager. So I've seen various iterations of upward feedback for those managers, and some companies like Semco is one I refer to a lot. They score the manager, and if your score drops below a certain point, as rated by your managees, you then get put on review basically. And so you need to have a conversation with your team and fix whatever it is that they don't like about you. And the logic is then just because you're a manager doesn't mean you have any more power. The power comes
Mhm.
from those that are being managed, and very much in a democratic kind of principle. Like you vote for the person that's going to manage you. So that's where I was going with that. And it might be your scale allows you to sort of get away without it. But I wonder if at some point,
Well,
yeah,
we do ask on, like I said, we do those formal written reviews for junior through senior contributors, and we do ask on their reviews about their opinion of the manager. So we do it. So it would bubble up. Um, and again, it's just such a small company, and all the work that we do is so visible. It it would be, I don't want to say it would be obvious, but I think it, between what we're learning from the contributor feedback and just the visibility of the work, and like the quality of the work. I think like if the team is performing very well, that speaks to the job that the manager is doing. Um, so a combination of all of those factors, I think we get a pretty accurate picture. But no, I mean we don't really
yeah.
formally assess managers or team leads.
Okay. Um, so this has come up a few times. I want to dig into this. The quality of the work. Now,
Mm,
again, the philosophical start point for so many organizations is the work, and I use Dart Lindsley's words here, is a negative good. Like you turn up to work. Why on earth would you want to do this? Therefore, we have to compensate you for that. We have to
mm,
compensate for the fact you're doing something that you would otherwise not choose to do yourself. And that frustrates me immensely because most work is really inherently interesting. And I always point to dull computer games like Tetris or Angry Birds that are inherently just very basic, but people will spend hours doing those things. It's still work, but they enjoy it because they get to do it in the way they want to. So
mhm,
there's two philosophical extremes here for me. One is a vision of work where we define these jobs and there's a list of all your activities and you have to do those activities. And it's so dull that we have to pay you to do them. And we're going to performance manage you and make sure you do those things. The other extreme is you hire smart people and you tell them what the problem is, or you show them towards the problem. And then you say, organize your work with your colleagues to figure out how to get that done. And now everything that you've said is suggesting that you're more towards that latter end of the spectrum. But I'm curious as to, in practice, again, so there's a fear that if you move to that, which is broader job descriptions, like broader spheres of responsibility, less direction, less measurements, less metrics about whether people are or are not doing their work. There's often this fear that, well, they just won't. Of course they would. Why would they?
mhm.
They're lazy. Like they're just going to do as little as possible to get paid. Now, clearly that doesn't happen at 37 signals. So again, I'm struggling to frame a question here, but so your philosophy of work in practice, how does that play out? Can you think of any good examples of how that work gets shaped in a way by the people doing it such that they enjoy that work?
I get it, and I mean, yeah, it comes down to that's what we hire for. So we hire people who love what they do. And that sounds like very reductive, but it's true. Like I said earlier, we get, I can probably think of 5 examples off the top of my head, really, of people who were at a very high level, like this fellow, whatever, this like, 10th level of whatever, um, fellowship emeritus
Yeah,
level
right.
of
Just keep
whatever
adding
at
words, don't they?
another, yeah.
Yeah.
Who are like, fuck it, I don't want to like do all of this other stuff. I just want to like come to work and do this. I just want to program, or I just want to be a designer, or I just want to focus and do this thing that I remember that I love to do. And those are the people that when I see those people come across my desk when we're hiring, I'm like, okay, they're going to do really well here. Or when you have a conversation with somebody when you're hiring and the way that they talk about how they approach their work or why they like their work, it just clicks in a way that has nothing to do with with projects, right? Or nothing to do with like finishing work or managing tasks or managing projects. It has everything to do with problem solving and learning and growing and finding new things that are interesting to you, because that's how people grow at 37 signals. It's not, there's no track for growth. Like I could never tell a programmer like, well, you have to do X, Y, and Z and then you'll level up to level 4. That is like so not how it works. It is like you need to like um experiment and like look into what's interesting to you and research and follow some thread that no one's followed before, that's useful and productive, and like and learn from what comes from that, and then that's going to contribute to your growth.
Everything you're talking about, even when you talk about growth, it's still about the work. It's about people finding work that stretches them and gives them opportunities to test their skills and progress in the face of challenge, but not insurmountable challenge and not political challenge and not autocratic challenge. It's just challenge about it's problem solving challenges is what is really that you're selling in terms of career opportunity. It's interesting. You remind me, there's a myth I like to roll out every so often. Have you heard the myth of Procrustes from Greek mythology by any chance?
Maybe.
So Procrustes was a innkeeper, and travelers, weary travelers, would knock on his door, and he'd give them food and wine and everything. And he had a bed, and he said, you can rest on this bed. But the catch was that if you were too tall, he would chop off your feet, and if you're too short, he would stretch you to fit the bed. And the idea was that he didn't see anything wrong with the bed; he saw everything wrong with the traveler. It's like, no, we need to reshape. And when I think about careers, I often think about that myth. And I think most companies have this Procrustean bed, where it's like you're going to fit into what we think the career should be for everyone in order for us to meet our objectives. And they have this headcount planning. They need that level. We need X number of that level and Y number of this level, which means that we need people in these roles. And in a few years, we need more of these people in these roles. And this is going to be our turnover. And it's all built around this assumption that we know what everyone's career should look and feel like.
Hmm.
And for me, that sucks the joy out of what life is all about. Life is about the unknown and testing your skills in unfamiliar places and environments to figure things out. So the way you describe a career fits into that model of life that we enjoy, which is we need to be challenged. We can't sit in the same place. We're a terrible species at doing nothing. We are not a lazy species. We literally go mad if we have nothing to do. That's why we have solitary confinement in prisons, because it's a torture to have nothing to do. So the idea that people want nothing to do, to me, is absolutely baffling. Of course they don't want nothing to do. What they are is afraid of the thing that you're offering them for some reason. So we need to look
Hmm.
in the mirror when people are afraid of the work we want to give them. What is it that we're telling them to do that is so off-putting? So now
I
I'm
mean,
going off on my tangent, but it feels like you've
it
broken the
does.
Procrustean bed. You've got what you let people build their own bed. You let people kind of figure out what they want to do with their lives.
It requires a huge amount of trust, right? To let people that you've hired, like, you don't know these people. You're hiring people who say that they love this work and demonstrate that they are good at this work. And you say, okay, cool. Like, I trust you. You go do that now. So you're resting the success of your business on the fact that they'll follow through. So I understand why that's a tough um, concept or I understand why that's tough to agree to, because you're letting go of a lot of control by letting every single person, because it really truly is every single person that works at 37 Signals is given the free reign to do the best work that they can, with the resources that we have, with a high degree of trust and autonomy. It says a lot about our founders, I think, for them to release the control and to turn over so much power to the people and the teams who work here.
Yeah. And that's part of the challenge a lot of the time, particularly in VC-backed companies. Like
Hmm.
founder syndrome has its own Wikipedia page for a reason. It's
I'm
that once you
sure.
create, so once you create something like that you own, and then you want to scale it, you have to relinquish power. And we're not very good at that in general. So was there any key event or anything that prodded the founders down this path that encouraged them to give up their power, or was that just a
Mm.
philosophical start point when they founded the company?
I just think that they couldn't work any other way, to be
Mm,
honest. It's, and I don't think I could either at this point.
right.
It's to spend so much time and energy managing the tasks that people are working on every single day. Like, I can't imagine spending my life like that, like as a manager, right? So if I'm a director of HR somewhere else and I spend 80% of my time making sure creating work for people, first of all, creating work, assigning work, making sure the work is happening, following through because the work's definitely not happening, and like making sure the work is happening exactly the way I want it to be happening. That is like so much time and energy that could be spent doing much more productive work. And I think that they realized that early on that I think when you're weighing, okay, the discomfort of like relinquishing that control, versus spending so much time and energy just micromanaging people, the scale is going to tip like way in the favor of just giving up a little bit of control and letting people, hiring good people who you trust to do the work, and it's going to win out every time. So I think that they just kind of realized that when they first started this company, and thankfully haven't lost it along the way.
And again, when you say it like that, we're literally creating work with this performance
Hmm.
management process. We are creating a version of work that's not the work that people want to do. So no one comes to a job to do a performance management process. No one looks
No.
forward to that. It's not fun work to do. So we're creating this work, and then the work itself inherently is designed to find shortcomings in people. Like when you have a performance ratings, it assumes that there are people's in ones and twos, and it assumes that there are people's in fours and five. So then you start, not you, but the proverbial you, people start creating narratives to suit that system, which is designed to
Hmm.
identify outliers. And then again, the research shows us the people administering those systems will find the fours and the fives, but they'll also find the ones and the twos, and they'll label them the ones and the twos. And because they're labeled ones and twos, they'll start treating them like ones and twos. And because they treat them like ones and twos, those people start acting like ones and twos. So it's this whole weird self-fulfilling cycle that justifies its own existence to the point that people then turn around and say, but then how do we know? We're going to have ones and twos.
Hmm.
We're not going to know who they are if we don't have this cycle in place. Well, no, you created them in the first place by having the cycle. So I know you have performance ratings, but decoupling it from pay, obviously,
Hmm.
de-emphasizes the role that plays. And to your point earlier, you're a company of high performers, and of course, why wouldn't you be as well if you're hiring in the first place? Those right people. So the words trust and autonomy come up a lot, which is obviously great to hear
Hmm.
from my perspective. And again, like what's so fascinating to me about 37 Signals is that you're already doing so many of the things that I advocate for when companies ask me, how should we do things? And it's always like, how do we redefine pay? So no, just forget the pay piece. Like it's about the work. It's about making the work interesting. That's how you get this
Yes.
engagement, this retention, attraction. But there was a testing point in your company's history that I wanted to ask you about. In 2021, when many companies were grappling with this idea of freedom and trust and discussion met with a barrier, and that was a political barrier. And in many companies, they
Yes.
had this problem that politics, for a long, long time, was something that was not really a big part of natural discussion. And it took on a much more serious form in 2021, where political discussions started taking place in families as well as the office. And people started realizing that they had different political views, which started creating more negative sentiment, shall we say, than it had ever done, at least in my career. It seemed to just take a
Oh
peak.
my God. Yeah.
And you had some issues over that, and you drew a line over that. Well, not you, but your company drew a line over that. Um, so I'm curious as to how that played out internally, because it did create some challenges, and it also tested your philosophy around autonomy and trust. So I was wondering if you could maybe talk me through how that happened and the decision that got made and the outcome as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a tough time. Um, let's put it mildly. Basically, things were building for quite a while. So, as I'm sure everybody remembers, that time just in general in the world there's a lot going on, in the U.S. in particular. So the timing of having these conversations around reframing how we expect people to show up to work was inconvenient, to say the least, because there was so much noise going on outside that um, it was hard to talk about keeping it quiet at work. So, but beyond that, yes, it came down. So the background is that we kind of just got to a breaking point where we felt the need. We had to draw a line between what was appropriate to bring to work and what wasn't. So that's what we did. Really wasn't about politics. It was about the amount of focus that was being taken away from the work. So conversations and just endlessly looping conversations at work amongst many, many people were happening on a very frequent basis, I would say daily basis. Um, and so focus was being taken away from what we're really here to do, in favor of topics we weren't coming to work to discuss, at the expense of like the other 50 people who were showing up and just saying like, I just want to come to work and do my work, and like, what is all this other noise happening over here? So like, it happened at an inconvenient time, but it had to happen. We made a policy, I guess, or a statement that like there's going to be a hard line of no, we called it politics, but it really was just like a refocus on the work and a
Mhm.
refocus on um almost like individualism. So the conversations that were being held were these endlessly looping conversations of, if, this thing is happening at work, we need to talk about it. This group of 20 people needs to talk about it. So we're 20 people are going to take 6 hours to talk about this thing. And then we're going to have all these like extensions of these conversations that are going to take even more time. So it's like, okay, this thing is happening at work. People are struggling. How can we address it? But how do we address it without harming the people who aren't struggling and supporting these people? And then how can we extrapolate this conversation to apply to this other group? And then, well, what if that other group is affected? And it just like, you can see how it just like goes out of control and takes hours and hours and hours. And so we just kind of put a stop to those kinds of conversations. It really had very little to do with politics and very much to do with a return to focus on work. I think because it was such a tumultuous time in the world, people reacted very badly to that statement. And so 20-ish people chose to leave over. We gave them the choice. We said, if you don't want to abide by this policy, you can leave, and they chose to leave. Overall, it was a positive change for the company. We were going in a direction that was not sustainable. It was, like I said, the focus was scattered. The focus was not on the work to be done. The focus was on a million other things. So it was a return to that. It was a return to work. It was a kind of a statement like, we appreciate that you have interests and that you have associations outside of work, but we're not paying you to bring those to work. We're not your family. We're not your friends. We're your employer, and you're coming here to do a job. It was a hard, it was a really, really traumatic time, but necessary.
Yeah. Did you get any boomerangs of that group that left?
No, no.
Probably for the best. It is interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead.
it was tough, man. Like, personally, I lost friends. It was a really, really weird time.
Well, it was a tough time in
People
general, though,
reacted
wasn't it? Not
badly.
just in work. It's
Yes,
almost just a
yes.
reflection of how the world was going at that point. It was a bit of a pressure cooker situation because of COVID. So all of a sudden, all these conversations were happening that never really happened before. But what's interesting to me, and the reason I wanted to ask about it, is it tested a lot of your trust and autonomy. So that was one of the few times that I could identify where you did have an autocratic decision, which was that this
Hmm.
is a line that
Hmm.
we're going to draw. And I'm curious as to whether there's, was there any discussion as to like, well, should we do this at all, or should we just let it play out, or is this costing us too much, and it'll be going down the road? I think you
Yeah.
said already you were going down the wrong path. I think were your words.
It
Yeah,
was a relief. It was a
yeah.
huge relief. It was kind of one of those things. I remember having the conversations with Jason and David before we like made any announcements about
Mm,
new policies, about how to roll. Like, there was never a question that we were going to roll out some policy. It was more of a question of um, how to do it without like completely blowing up the company. Because it's like hard to even describe now, 5 years later, like how, like you said, pressure cooker, just everybody was on edge, and it was so hard to like manage that, um, and like try to anticipate how people were going to react. So we got to those discussions, right, where you're like, oh, okay, how can we like soften the blow? And then we're like, well, we can't. Like, we're just going to have to rip the Band-Aid off and just say what we mean. And this is what we mean. This is what we need to do. This is what needs to be done. So we just need to say it. And so that's what happened. And that's why people reacted so badly. And I think looking back now, like, yeah, we could have done better with the messaging. Um, maybe that would have changed how it was received. I don't know. Maybe more people would have stayed. Maybe some people would have come back. I don't know. But at the time, it felt like overdue. Like we should have said something 6 months ago, kind of thing. And so that's how we just kind of said, okay, we can't think about how to message, how to do the messaging here. We just got to say it. And so we did it. Um, and like I said, it was a relief. It was a relief to just say it and to have like our truth out there, right? Like this is why we're all here. And guys, we all came here to do the work that we do, and like, let's just do it.
Mm.
And
I mean,
yeah,
I think it's a really good
eventually
thing.
it was fine.
Yeah.
Eventually
Well,
we all came back together, and it's great now.
and it's very useful for my purposes as well, because it's an illustration that just because you've got this quite democratic, flat, participative work
Hmm.
culture doesn't mean that leadership can't make decisions. That when the time is right, there are things that need to be done, and the direction of the company still is paramount. So when it then again, like there's a misconception about this is not a kumbaya environment when everyone does whatever they want all the time. There is still a strategy to be fulfilled as a company. Your job is to figure out how to organize your work in service of that strategy. So that's kind of why I wanted to talk about it. That was a point at which that message was not being heard, from what I understand. That strategy was not
Yes,
being done. The work was
it
not
got
being
lost.
organized. Yeah, it got lost
Yeah.
a little bit. And at that point, you do need some of that autocratic command to come back in
Yes.
to just get the train back on the tracks, which is why I think it's a really good test of that participatory culture and a good sign that you
Yeah.
still have that
And
leadership
I
now.
think that because that happens so infrequently,
Mm.
it's very meaningful when
Right,
when it does
exactly. Yeah,
happen.
there's something really has, there's something going on
Something's
because,
really gone off the
yeah.
rails if we're going
Yeah.
to step in. The only other thing that comes to mind is like we work in the open, we work very visibly within Basecamp. That's just how we work. And there was some thread that went off the rails. I don't remember. I can't even tell you what it was, but there was a comment thread on a post that went off the rails, and Jason turned off the comments on the thread. It's shocking, right? Like that doesn't happen. And so like that, just like the action of it, that action itself, just the fact that it happened at all is very like recentering. Where you're like, okay, we need to, this is the action that's been taken, then we need to kind of, we need to hit restart here. And the same thing with the 2021 thing. Like because that, I mean, that was a very dramatic version of that, but like it was the same idea where if they feel the need to like step in and make these new policies, then something truly has gone wrong, and we all need to hit restart here.
I'd like to ask a bit about equity. Do you have an equity plan? So you don't have a typical stock option or RSU plan or
No,
anything like that. So how
no,
is
don't have that.
37 Signals owned then? Is it just a privately owned, founder-owned company? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
bootstrapped and proud.
So, so this is a topic that interests me. So most companies, startup companies, default to VC backing,
Mhm.
and they default to more VC backing. And the VC to IPO route, first of all, is very, very low probability. Like the odds of going public are extremely low. And second, going public is no guarantee of success as well. It's just another way of raising money. But the VC backed community is very much about growing fast, not making money, getting to evaluation, getting more VC money. But the trade off is that you relinquish power as a
Mhm.
founder in particular. And as you relinquish that power, you're kind of beholden to the needs of your backers and your investors, and they ultimately want to cash out at some point for their investors and their dollars that they hold on behalf of other people. So 37 Signals has avoided that by remaining private the entire time, but obviously you can't really use equity then in the same way. So on the one hand, it's giving you that freedom. So a lot of the things that you do, I imagine, would be more difficult to do if you had VC funding, because you would be more tasked with growth. And to do that growth, you have to hire aggressively and, but you get to do things in your own time on your own terms.
Yes.
So the first thing I'll say is that demonstrates that you don't need to move fast and break things continuously to be successful. You've been around 25 years as a private company, making money, paying people their salaries, their high salaries, and you haven't needed to take that hyper growth pathway in order to achieve success. Success for you looks different to what a
Yes.
lot of private companies assume it needs to look like. Well, let me just pause there for any reflections on that. Is that an accurate representation? But my next question was going to be around whether not being able to give out equity is a problem for
Mm.
you. But I'm just curious as to whether you've got any thoughts on what I just said.
No, you're right about the VC. That's a very conscious decision by the founders that if you are reporting to someone, you know, they don't want to be beholden to someone else for what happens with the company, what happens with the products, or the people within it. So that yes, very much a conscious decision. We've been profitable for 25 years, so it's not there, and there's no desire to grow. I think. I mean, I don't want to speak for them, but I think the point was never to like get to a point and sell. Like it's not this like, grow, 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 grow at like exponentially and then what? Sell. Um, the point was to like make cool stuff with cool people, and that's kind of it. Like that really is the goal. And like we happened to be profitable all those years, and like thank goodness we were, but that vibe has never changed. It's always been like we're just here to make cool stuff and have like be creative and learn new things and work with great people. That's it. And the equity piece certainly has come up. I can't say it hasn't come up in, like, so when we're doing salary adjustments every year, it's like, well, what about this thing that other people are getting? Um, but I think we compensate for that with our base salary, like where we're targeted for our base salaries and the profit share. The longer that you're with the company, that that grows too. It's come up in conversations before, but I don't think, again, that the pay is the driving force behind why people really stay here.
And it's interesting because equity obviously comes up a lot in San Francisco tech or US
Yeah,
tech in general. But it comes up because it's an aspect of the. It's just you just raise it. That's part of the negotiation process, isn't it? You
right.
raise that. But I do think that the curtain's been drawn a little bit on VC backed equity in particular, because there were once these stories about millionaires, and there still are, of course. Like if you join Anthropic or something other early on, you're going to do pretty well by this point, by the time they IPO. But there are also so many stories of people joining VC-backed companies where the equity amounted to literally zero, because a lot of the
Right.
time it does. And there's something like 1 in 20 companies go public. So there's a 19 out of 20 chance that you're probably not going to get that big number that everyone's planning on. So I think people are asking for it. But to anyone thinking that equity is imperative, just because people ask for it doesn't make it imperative. Like people can go and buy whatever equity they feel like. So as long as you pay people a healthy amount of money that covers their needs, they can choose where and how to invest that money themselves. And most people, and listening to their financial advisors, will want a diversified portfolio, which you don't get
Mhm.
by getting equity from one company, of course. And then you've got all the problems of exercising it and paying the taxes and things like that. And if it expires, you've got to do all that. So once again, evidently, you've got a proof in concept that you don't need equity to attract and retain good people.
Like to your point, introduces almost like a complexity to compensation that we just kind of reject.
Right.
Um, it we try to keep it we try to keep everything about performance and pay and anything regarding employment as simple as possible. And introducing this like variable that may or may not impact you, or and it fluctuates and all these, and it doesn't really mean anything, introduces this like this piece that just we try. I understand it exists. I understand that if that other people look for that when they're negotiating salaries and packages. But I think that we compensate for it in other more straightforward and more tangible ways.
And this ties into your point I want to come back to, actually, you made before we got onto equity, which was about what is your company for? This is a big philosophical question, and it impacts so much. And I don't think a lot of founders necessarily think about this enough. What is your company for? Now, if you're a VC backed company and you're going to IPO, well, then your company is there to make money for somebody else, or your founders and the employees, but they're a relatively small proportion of that ownership model. That is what your company is for. Your company is to go public and therefore to make money. But to your point, by not going public, your company can be for whatever your founders and your employees say it's for. And when you ask people what do they want from work, the response is good work, more good work. It's not like we don't want to just cash out and move on to somewhere else in this endless cycle of trying to find a happy place to sit down and get things done. If you have a place where people can get things done, particularly if you're able to attract the people, to your point, like when you said your ears perk up when you hear those people that have already tried and failed to just jump around and find these jobs, and what they want to do is do good quality work. So if you have people that want to do good work, then your mission is to offer good work to your people while we
Yes.
deliver. And in order to do that, we need to deliver good products to our customers. And it's wonderfully simple. The more good quality
Yes.
work we give to our customers, the more good quality work we give to our people. But again, this is a long diatribe that I'm going on now. But what's interesting is that if you take that VC backed model, you inherently eat away at that desire to deliver good quality work with good quality products. Now your desire is to be profitable and to grow your
Mhm.
ARR. And no matter how well intentioned a founder is, they're going to be distracted by that. And I feel a lot of VC backed companies get to a point where that tension becomes very visible at later stages, where people joined for the work and they loved the work and they remember a time when the work was good and great and fun that they could do that. But then it shifts to a time where the work takes a back seat to the growth objectives of the company. So again, I don't really have a question on this one, but it's interesting to me because what you said is that you've got founders that recognize what the purpose of that company is, and it's not an exit event. And taking that
No.
goal away allows you to focus on your customers and your employees and to exist indefinitely as that entity.
Yes, that is true. And I will say that I appreciate they're very open to changing what the company is for. Like we never have. I wouldn't say like we haven't ever changed that, but it's like right now in the moment, they, I will say they don't like to make like long-term proclamations of here's where the company is headed,
Mm.
which I love
Yeah.
because it's like who the fuck knows where like what is going to happen tomorrow? I don't nobody knows. Um and so it's great and it's refreshing and it's great and I love working under the understanding that we are all here to do great work together right now on this thing that we're working on. Um Usually it's product development, right? Usually it's Basecamp development or some other product. And like even as someone who's not in a technical role, I feel that is my job. My job is to show up and support the people who are working on the new version of Basecamp or this new product. Um, and understanding that we're all here to do that, all here to do good work, all here working towards the same thing, trying to get better at what we do and trying to improve the way we work at all times and the culture that we work in. Like that's really all why we're here. And that's the way it is right now. That might change tomorrow. Some people might find that like hard to like to work under, to
Mm.
not know like what, that things might change at any time. I find it great and refreshing and
But it's the truth, isn't it?
um
Like, regardless of whether you think you have a strategy, we all know how
totally.
long strategies stick around until things change. Like, the idea that
Yeah.
anyone knows what's
Yeah.
going to happen in 5 years is ludicrous.
Right. And like nothing's ever changed. This has always been the philosophy that we've worked under as long as I've been with the company. But I do appreciate that you know, that everything that people admit that everything's always up in the air and like who knows, maybe we'll start a new product tomorrow. Like and then that's what we're working on. Like it's just it's kind of always in flux and it's great. Um and the fact that we work under this philosophy that is so intellectually rewarding
Mm, mm.
is great too. There's nothing driving us as a company or as individuals that's outside of my control. I
Right.
can control the work that I do. Everyone can control the work that he or she does. I can control how much better I get at. All of these things are within my control and very satisfying
Yeah.
to show up and accomplish every day. I'm not chasing anything. That gets exhausting. So it's a great environment to work in, and I think that that's really why people stick around as long as they do.
Yeah, and we keep coming back to this theme. It's trust and autonomy in the
Mhm.
work. It's all about the work, and almost everything we talked about, it comes back to how can we make the work enjoyable and how can we let people shape the work into ways that they want to do it. And I don't know if you come across this term, but there's a number of people that I speak with, like Dart Lindsley and Luke Omani, and I spoke with Meg Bernard May recently, who have this phrase "work as a product." It's that, and you kind of have that inherently, which is that you offer work. That's the product that you offer your people. And like any product, it needs to be interesting, or it needs to be something that they want to do, because they're going to choose whether or not they use that product. So, and what you've done is you've created a working environment that allows that product to be something that your employees want to buy. They like that
Mhm.
product, so it's a good product. So rather than assuming work is a static concept that's set from the top and trickle down, and you either do it or you don't do it, you allow the people from the ground up to reshape that work. It actually, and something you mentioned reminded me of a really, really wonderful story when NASA was trying to put people on the moon in the 60s. It was a very aggressive timeline that John Kennedy set for that. And there was a wonderful case study of what it was like to work at NASA at the time. By all accounts, it was brilliant because they had this really clear overall strategy, but huge autonomy in how to do that, and the resources to do it. And someone interviewed one of the janitors that was cleaning, and said, like, you're doing a really, really good job here when you're going, above and beyond. Like, why are you doing all this cleaning? I said, I'm not a cleaner. I'm working to put a man on the moon.
Mhm.
And it's the same philosophy. It's like we're all just trying to do the same thing here.
Totally.
Like we've got different things that we're trying to do, but we're all working towards the same mission. So, like to your point, even if you're in HR, if you have a truly mission-driven company, I say even HR is a very rewarding place if it's done right. Like even HR, immediately just downplaying it. But yeah, whatever function you're in, you're still working towards that same goal, and your job to shape your work in a way that supports that mission. And if you're allowed to do that, it's quite amazing as to the different ways that people will shape their work for their
Yeah.
own work to be fulfilling.
And I wouldn't even say if you're allowed to do it. It's like as long as you're doing that, you will succeed here. As long as I show up with my primary focus being I'm here to support the work, this is what we're all working towards the same thing. As long as like that's kind of my guiding principle, I'll do well, right? And I'm saying me, but like if I'm on the support team, if I'm on the ops team, as long as that's how I'm showing up to work with the understanding that I'm here you know, to support the mission of the company, to drive what we're doing forward, you'll do well. You'll find the problems that need to be solved. We already know that these people are skilled when we hire them. We know that you're good at what you do. So as long as you show up with that mindset and with the problem solving mindset, then that's fine. You'll do well.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what we look for when we hire.
Yeah. Um, we talked a bit about strategy, and the lack of a long term strategy. So you just launched a new product. Like, how did that strategy come? That's clearly a big strategic decision. How did that decision get made, and where did that come from?
I mean, I don't want to speak again for the founders or the technical teams, but I think it came out of exactly kind of what I said before, which is like, let's do more cool things. Like this product so basically what we did is Basecamp 4 was the product that we had until recently. We did a complete overhaul of Basecamp 4 and now it's Basecamp 5. So it's the same product. It's upgraded by a lot, like a lot of new features. Um, and it was born out of we use Basecamp. The features that were in it were not working for us, so we extrapolate from there that they're not working as well for our customers as they could be. So let's improve it and like let's continue to improve our bread and butter here at Basecamp. Um, so again, not born out of any sort of like market research or anything like that. It was just this isn't quite right. We need to fix it, and continue to do cool things with cool people and continually improve. So still in line, very much
Yeah.
so with the philosophy
So,
that
but it was
goes
a
way
kind of
back.
collective decision then. It sounds like. Okay. Was that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there was a roadmap and, product strategy meetings but we still do all of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But, and I don't, going back probably months to years, at this point, but it was a collective effort driven by our product strategy team.
Yeah, and I guess like the reason I ask is because just to differentiate from the point of frustration that so many people get in their jobs, which is the strategy gets decided by someone they barely met,
Mm,
and then that trickles down to your objectives for the year, and people look at that and go, "Well, one, no one talked to me about that. Like
yeah.
I didn't have any say in this, therefore I'm less bought into it immediately. Like even if you communicate that well, the fact that you didn't get a say in that strategy impacts your desire to work towards it. And second of all, you don't agree with it because but you're closer to the work, you know the work, and to your point, your team uses Basecamp as a product, so they understand it, they're connected to it, so they're the best place
Yeah.
to understand whether that strategy makes sense to upgrade to Basecamp 5 or relaunch a new product. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and everyone's very involved in that, right? Like it's a team of what, like 15, 20 people that, are on the front lines of new product development. So I mean that they're very much involved in the planning, strategic planning of the new product, shaping the scope. Like if we would schedule out the work, and so I mean, we still expect people to work on the projects as assigned to them, as collectively decided by the kind of product strategy team, I guess you would call it. Um, but like there's buy-in from day one because we're all working on this to improve this product that we all use day to day, and is our flagship product.
there is one challenge that tends to come with decentralized companies. So when I think of the big decentralized companies of the world, like Hire and Burzorg and Handelsbanken in Sweden, one challenge of decentralization is that you can end up with silos if you're not careful. Like because everyone's doing their own thing, then there's no central decision process, and you don't want people working at cross purposes or trying to solve the same problem twice. So, do you need any formal mechanisms to transfer knowledge around the company, or do you find that the group is tight enough for that to happen organically?
Mm, a little bit of both. We do have some formal mechanisms. So have we work in cycles, 6-week cycles, and that's how projects are planned. So we plan projects at the start of the 6-week cycle. The team works on them, and then we wrap it up at the end. And then this just runs throughout the year, 6 weeks, 6 weeks, 6 weeks. And every team works that way. So at the beginning of the cycle, when we have planned the work for that cycle, we write what we call a kickoff. And so we have it's like a document, right? Where you're sharing with the company what you plan to work on, what your team plans to work on for the next 6 weeks. Then you work on it, and that's where the autonomy comes in. So like if product plans something for their 6-week cycle, you kind of just like hand the project over. You're like, you need to update this feature, and then you kind of hand it over to the team, and then they figure out how to do it. There's no like roadmap for each individual project. It's just like a big 6-week planning document. So anyway, every team does that. We write our kickoffs, we post them, so the whole company is aware of what me and my team are going to be working on for the next six weeks, what products going to be working on. We do it, and then at the end of the 6 weeks, we write what we call heartbeat, which sums up what we have worked on for the past 6 weeks. Ideally, it'll look a lot like the kickoff, and you'll have like hit all the things that you planned to do. A lot of times that doesn't really happen, or things change. Priorities shift throughout the 6 weeks. Um, so there is that formal mechanism for sharing what everyone's doing. We also have check-in questions in Basecamp that we're expected to answer, which of stand-ups really. So it's
Okay.
kind of what will you be working on this week and what have you worked on today. So we have those, and then yes, just organically, there's a lot of
I assume those checking questions are
cross-pollination.
more for organizational awareness rather than making sure people are getting their work. Because when you hear checking
Oh,
questions, it's
yes.
like it's not
Yeah,
really
no, no, no,
it's not
no.
really
I
trying to
would never like
yeah.
I
Oh,
would
okay.
never
Now
like
that
go through
person's
and be
doing
like,
that. Yeah.
like let me mark down what everyone's
See
doing.
me.
No, no. It's a visibility thing. It's a, engagement thing, like
Right.
just making sure people are they actually just spark conversation more than
Right.
anything, I think, where it's like, oh, cool, you're working on this, I'm working on that. So that does happen where there's some kind of cross-pollination there, where if someone on one team's working on something and it interests someone else, they kind of start talking.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, organically, there's just a lot of overlap. Like I said, when we're all kind of working towards the same goal, then there's overlap on the work. So like ops, yes, they're responsible for like our technical architecture and keeping the lights on and all these things. But like, of course, what they're doing overlaps with what our performance programming team is working on. So they, and then that overlaps with what product is doing, because product has an issue with performance, and so they need to talk over here. And so I mean, it all really, without like formal meetings or anything like that. It does
Mm-hmm.
overlap and people talk. And again, the teams are so small that issues bubble up and people talk. And we are talking constantly in Basecamp, and there's, um, work being done in Basecamp and conversations happening there. And so things bubble up and teams
Mm. So it's fair
talk
to say
about it.
that you have a fairly high degree of psychological safety, it sounds like, because so for that
Yeah.
to happen, for things to bubble up, people need to be willing to say, right? So in high trust environments, people generally are because they know that they're not going to get a rap across the knuckles because they're not worried whether
Yeah.
they're doing is right or wrong or not. So it sounds
No, no.
like it when
People ask for help.
yeah, people are willing to
People
ask
ask for
for help.
help
Yeah, yeah.
constantly.
Okay.
Or people if it is it one of the things I love about working at 37 Signals is people are like people are so smart that they know that they're not the smartest in the room. So if
Yeah.
they if they hit a point where they need someone to help or they have a question or they don't know where something is, then they will ask.
Mhm.
Um, and so there's a lot of that going on at all
And
times.
and we come back to this when we go back all the way back to the start when we're talking more about pay, where
Mhm,
if you attach pay to individual contribution, you are inherently telling people not to raise their hand and say, I'm not the
mhm,
smartest. If your pay is delivered based on your whatever subjective measures, intelligence contribution, then to ask a question that says, I don't know the answer to this, maybe someone else does, is inherently saying you deserve more of the merit budget than I do.
mm,
So I think as soon as you decouple pay from this, you allow those conversations to happen. I think those conversations do and can happen, or can and do happen rather, in other companies, but in spite of those pay systems, which effectively discourage that kind of honesty that you're
mm,
describing. So the last question I wanted to ask then is, whenever I talk about these principles, which have worked very well at scale, and you've got a relative sort of medium-sized company, 60 people, but these principles work at scale in many companies around the world, but there's a general reluctance to accept that this could be a model of working built around trust and a lack of
mhm.
control, relinquishing power, relinquishing top down authority. Do you have any advice? A lot of the people that listen to this podcast, a lot of people on LinkedIn are working in companies that they're in this cycle. They're in this merit performance management, individual pay for performance cycle. And it's difficult to see a world outside of that because they've jumped from company to company. And the assumption is we just need to improve that. That's the version of pay and performance that we need. There must be a solution somewhere that makes that work. And I would argue there isn't. There's no research to show that it will ever work effectively in collaborative environments. But do you have any advice for people that are in those companies as to how maybe they could break free? Maybe they could offer something different, or maybe they could create, an alternative, or maybe escape from that cycle.
Mm. Well, unfortunately, it does have to come from the top down, right? Like it has to be just how a company operates for it to be for that to happen at that level. But I think teams could, if they have some freedom to operate within a team, um, to kind of add in some of those values that create that high trust, highly autonomous way of working. So you can't decouple pay from performance if that's just the way the company is set up. But I think that you can draw some of the values that are contained within that system, the system that we work in, and apply them to the way that individuals work or the way that teams work to benefit the way that the team works. So creating that high trust environment, creating giving people problems instead of tasks, letting people work under the or kind of in the environment that they're most comfortable with and letting them work with intelligent people, giving them all the resources that they need to do the work that they need to do, not creating work for yourself and for the team. So again, like it's all these little things that you could add into a team or kind of shift the way the team works that might make it more like that. But I don't know how an individual or how a team would
Yeah, it's true.
change from the bottom up.
I think it can look almost impossible, but at the same time, I do think there are a lot of managers that have been through it enough to know that it doesn't work, those traditional cycles, and they'll almost just they'll de-emphasize it to the degree they're allowed to de-emphasize it.
Sure.
So they'll do the things you describe to the degree to which they can. And I had a manager once that asked me these questions about basically how I want to get my work done, and a few years later, and I answered it, and he did what he could for me. And a few years later, he's like, "Well, I went down that list, and I can give you that, I can give you that, I
Mm,
can't give you that because that's the way we do things, but I can give you that." So his job was just to give as much as he could as a manager to me for the work to be
yes.
engaging. So managers, and there's a book by inspired by Gallup research called "First Break All the Rules." And as you can tell from the title, it's about good managers who break the rules. They just do things in the way that makes sense for the work. So, and I think HR's role is not to frown on those managers. So to allow managers and encourage managers to work with freedom to the extent they're able to be the manager that breaks all the rules, rather than necessarily always towing the line in terms of policy and cycles and ratings and pay and differentiation. I think sometimes it can feel difficult as an HR professional to do that.
And I think too, if someone's able to do that, if someone's able to kind of work within the team to make some changes, I would examine. I would look towards the motivation, right? So if if there's all these outside things that the company is saying should motivate people, like pay, um, and you want to get away from that, then what can you offer in terms of motivation, that's not that? So, how can you, what's driving the people that work for you? Ask them what motivates you. If we're not talking about compensation, what else motivates you? And then how can you change the system or improve the system to give them what is motivating to them, what's driving them?
I think the main theme that keeps coming out of this is trust. Like, hire good
Mhm.
people, let them find a way to get their work done, support them, and as long as they're in alignment with that strategic goal, then the work is for them to shape. And it sounds like you found a way to do that. In fact, you've introduced some hierarchy. It doesn't mean a world without any hierarchy. You still have levels. You still have times where it requires some autocratic decisions to be made to make sure that people are allowed to work in alignment with that strategy. But evidently, this is a 25-year-old company that's worked with high trust and high autonomy successfully for a long time. So congratulations on that. So Andrea, again, so thank you so much for your time. It's been really, really fascinating to speak to you about this. I've been looking forward to this for a long time, to hear a bit more from you about how 37 Signals operates. It's been really interesting for me personally to hear about that. For anyone listening, I would suggest getting a copy of Rework as well. It's a very short, well-written, approachable, no-nonsense book to build a company in the mold of 37 Signals. So if anyone's listening and wants to learn more, I recommend that. Andrea, are there any other resources that you would suggest that people look for?
Well, you can check out Basecamp
Yep.
for some project management software. We have a new update out
I hear
just
good
last
things.
week.
Yeah.
It's good. It's great. There's a couple other books too that the founders have written. Rework is the best starter book. There's also another book called "It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work,"
Yes,
which is
yes.
a really good one to check out as well.
Okay, well, thanks again, and enjoy life at 37 Signals. I apologize for the deluge of applications you're about to get following this podcast. The millions of listeners that are going to
Great. Love to see them.
All right, take care then. Speak soon. Okay,
Thank you.
bye. Once again, thank you very much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this, as a reminder, please like or rate this episode on the platform that you use to listen to your podcast, and please share it with a friend. That goes a long way to letting people find out about the show. If you find these concepts interesting, my goal is to share stories of companies and thinkers and writers that think differently about the role of people in the workplace. My belief is that companies rely far too heavily on extrinsic forms of control. It's a model that we've inherited from the world of factory production lines, but it doesn't apply well to the modern knowledge worker. And if you find these ideas interesting, my book, What Pay Costs, looks into the issues that we tend to create when we rely on extrinsic motivation to drive performance in the workplace. Thanks very much for listening, and I'll see you again in the next episode.